Friends, you're in the military of a summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 28th of April of 2026. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on Ukraine. Probably the most important update of the previous 24 hours is that the Ukrainians once again attacked the city of Tuapse, and from this area we received lots of updates. And we see that the Ukrainians once again attacked the city of Tuapse, and it seems that this was the third attack since the beginning of April of 2026, and as a result of these two attacks, the refinery of the city of Tuapse is about to collapse completely. We received lots of updates from the area fire anomalies, and it seems that the Russians stored oil for export in this area, and the Ukrainians most likely knew that the Russians have stored fuel for export purposes, and this is the reason why the Ukrainians attacked the oil refinery exactly during the previous night. As you can see, we have lots of explosions, we have fire, and we see that most likely the Tuapse oil refinery most likely collapsed or about to collapse. The Russians are saying that during the previous night, the Ukrainians used 158 drones to attack the territory of the city of Tuapse, and the Russians, according to information we have stated, that they have managed to destroy almost every single drone that was launched by the Ukrainians, but it seems that several drones managed to break through the Russian layered defense and to hit the city. Furthermore, we received another video published by pro-Russian sources, and in this video we can see how the Russians are testing new anti-drone vehicle, and it seems that the Russians still haven't started using these anti-drones along the line of combat contact, but of course, if the Russians begin using these drones, obviously the number of successful strikes from the Ukrainian side will reduce significantly. The sources are saying that the Russians are ready to start massive production of these type of drones, and most likely these drones would be used by mobile fire groups that the Russians will deploy through the entire territory of the Russian Federation and along main objects of critical and energy infrastructure of the Russian Federation. The Russians during the previous 24 hours also attacked the territory of Ukraine, and the sources are saying that the Russians used 123 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and again the biggest number of updates about attacks and explosions we received from the most northern parts of Ukraine. From the area of the city of Chernihiv, we have a video where we can see a very big explosion that occurred after the Russians attacked another object of energy infrastructure in this area. Furthermore, the Russians attacked the city of Konotop, and the Russians attacked the territory along the border. So the Russians are very interested for some reason in the most northern and the northeastern parts of Ukraine. Some sources may say that the Russians are attacking this territory because currently the Russians are attacking in the direction of the city of Sumy, so that is why the Russians are trying to destroy the Ukraine's logistic capabilities. From the other side, as we discussed, the Russians could attack this area because the Ukrainians used the northeastern parts of Ukraine to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation, but the Ukrainians believe that the Russians attacked the northern parts of Ukraine because the Russians are preparing another offensive operation, and this time this is going to be the Chernihiv offensive operation. Today the Ukrainians published lots of very interesting updates on this matter. Ukraine is urgently building a continuous line of defense from the Kiev reserve to Sumy, according to General Sirotka, the chief of engineering forces of the Ukraine Armed Forces. A significant amount of resources are being allocated to build this line as quickly as possible to prevent unexpected threats to the state. And this is approximately the line, and this is approximately how exactly this defense line is going to look like. This line is going to be built from the city of Kiev towards the city of Sumy, right exactly along the border, with a gap of from 5 to 15 kilometers from the border between the Russian Federation and Ukraine itself. And another important thing is that today several sources stated that a Russian DRG plans to breach the Ukrainian border in Chernihiv and Sumy regions. Preparations are underway to involve 200 servicemen in the Chernihiv and Shostka directions. So the Ukrainians are saying, and pro-Ukrainian sources are saying, that in coming days we might see an offensive operation from the Russian side, and the Russians are tasked or would be tasked to improve their positions as much as possible in the direction of the biggest city in the northeastern parts of Ukraine, the city of Shostka. So everything is possible, and the Russians might try to do this. And as we discussed during the previous videos, the most important tasks of this possible offensive operation could be establish complete control over the logistic line between the city of Kiev and Sumy, to probably to get as close as possible to the city of Kiev itself, maybe even on the distance of artillery strikes or on the distance of battle control with drones and Geran drones and so on. So everything is possible from the northern direction. According to pro-Ukraine sources, this might happen very, very soon.
Bestil nu. Begynd at glæde dig. TUI. Alt det, en rejse kan være.
Hej. Jeg vil gerne have byttet det her. Har du en kvittering?
Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the northeastern part of Kharkiv region. During the previous 24 hours we received lots of important updates, and the most important one is that the Russians, as a result of an offensive operation, established complete control over the settlement by the name of Zemlianky. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. As we can see, the Russians continue advancing with the purpose to establish complete control over the river of Volcha, and according to this configuration of the front line and according to a current situation of the Ukrainian forces in this area, of their status and their capabilities, we believe that the Russians are able to establish complete control over the river of Volcha within the next 3 weeks or so. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Slavyansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, changes were recorded. The Russians improved their positions significantly in the area of the settlement of Kriva Luka, and these are the changes on the ground between the dates. Just yesterday, the Russians stated that they managed to capture the settlement of Ozorne, and today pro-Russian sources stated that the Russians managed to improve their positions even further, and the Russians managed to get the river of Seversky Donets. Currently, the distance between the river of Seversky Donets and possible positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation is less than 2 kilometers, which makes this corridor completely unacceptable for evacuation and for maneuvering. We believe that due to this configuration of the front line, in coming days the Russians will establish complete control over the Seversky Donets river, something like this along this red line, and from this perspective most likely the Russians will try to cross the river of Seversky Donets in the northern direction with the purpose to outflank and to outmaneuver the Ukrainians and to attack the main defense positions of the armed forces of Ukraine from the back. So the battle for the pockets to the east of the Seversky Donetsk Donbass Canal is also coming to its logical end. Probably the days of this direction are numbered. As for the Konstantinovka direction, during the previous 24 hours, once again, we received lots of updates. These days, we receive lots of updates from this area, and these are the changes on the ground between the previous several days, between the 24th of April and 28th of April of 2026. And by the end of the 25th of April, the Russians cut the road between Dovga-Balka and Konstantinovka physically. By the end of the 26th of April, the Russians improved their positions both in the city of Dovga-Balka and in the southwestern parts of Konstantinovka. By the end of the 7th of April, the Russians improved their positions even further in the northern direction. Probably they're planning to move along these 3 lines further in the northern direction to attack the most northern parts of the city of Konstantinovka and to attack the Ukrainian positions from behind. And by the end of the 28th of April of 2026, the Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Illinivka, which is located in the southwestern direction of the city of Konstantinovka. The situation with Illinivka was confirmed by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. Today they stated that the battle for this small village had finished. Furthermore, the Russians intensified their attacks over the northern and the northwestern parts of the city of Konstantinovka. Here we can see how Russians with artillery and with aviation were attacking temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. In this video, for example, we can see see a logistic roads between the cities of Konstantinovka and Alexeyevka-Drushkovka that were attacked by aviation. So everything tells us that the Russians most likely will continue offensive operation in the direction of Nikolaevka, Dovgaya Balka, Raskoshna, and then further in the northern direction with the purpose to attack Osikova, Alexeyevka, Drushkovka. So summarizing everything, to outflank and to attack the city of Konstantinovka from behind, trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back from the central and the northern parts of the city without showing significant resistance to the armed force of the Russian Federation. The situation is quite complicated in this area, but we see that the Russians are pushing, and probably not so fast, but they're improving their positions from day to day. As for the Dobropolye direction, during the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded in this area. The Russians continue outflanking the settlement of Sergeyevka from the north and the northeast. The Russians continue improving their positions around the settlement of Belitska, and as we understand, the Russians are tasked to establish complete control of Tseantsa, the Krivorozhe-Shevchenko defense layer, so this territory, which means that in coming days the battle for this area is going to start. This is a very important defense layer of the armed forces of Ukraine, because if Russians are able to answer this territory, then the Russians from positions of this defense layer will be able to continue advancing further in the northern direction, and the Russians will be able to continue offensive operation in the northwestern direction towards the settlement of Krivorozhe. And from positions of the settlement of Krivorozhe, the Russians may continue offensive operation further in the northwestern direction, deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. And you know that it's very difficult even to project what is going to happen when Ukrainians lose the cities of Dobropolye, Drushkovka, Konstantinovka, Kramatorsk, Slaviansk, all these cities, because there is a very big gap between these cities and the next large cities of Ukraine. And we are talking about the cities of Pavlograd. So we can even add some line to the map to show the line of big cities of Ukraine. And this is the line, the city of Zaporozhye, Sinelnikovo, Pavlograd, Lozovaya, and then further in the northern direction almost till the city of Kharkiv. So when Ukraine, and if Ukraine loses the cities of Dobropolye, Drushkovka, Kramatorsk, Slaviansk, Konstantinovka, Izum, then the Russians will answer this gap with significant number of villages, where of course the Ukrainians will not be able to show significant resistance, which means that the Russians may begin advancing through this gap much faster in comparison with the old Donbas defense line where the Russians are fighting right now.
Nu nærmer semifinalerne i det UEFA Champions League sig.
As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special, probably for the first time since the beginning of the major Zaporozhye offensive operation, but probably during the next days we will receive additional updates. We have covered most of the updates regarding the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Probably another important thing is that the Russians, right after the Ukrainians attacked the city of Tuapse, began bombing and attacking the city of Kiev with drones. And we know that we need to understand one important thing about the Ukrainian attack on the city of Tuapse. You know that it's a rule, it's something like a diplomatic rule to mirror everything. And of course, we may say, so what the Russians can mirror on the Ukrainian attack on the city of Tuapse. The Russians attack the territories of Ukraine every single day with dozens of drones and with hundreds of drones and with dozens of missiles. But there is a very important difference between attacks that the Russians have carried out since the beginning of the special military operation and this attack that the Ukrainians carried out in the direction of the city of Tuapse. First of all, and the most important thing, that the Ukrainians managed to deal physical damage to the oil refinery, and the most important thing is that as a result of this attack of the armed forces of Ukraine on the Tuapse refinery, an ecological disaster occurred. So ecological disaster probably with significant consequences, and the Russians most likely will not be able to stabilize the situation in the Black Sea around the city of Tuapse within maybe even years. So, which means that when talking about this simple diplomatic rule about mirroring of everything, this means that now the Russians, according to this situation, most likely in the Kremlin, the president of the Russian Federation and his general are trying to make a very difficult decision how to attack the territory of Ukraine to create the same situation with ecological disaster. So this is a possible development of the current situation. So this is the reason why attacks like attack on Tuapse is a very dangerous situation. Now let's move further. Another important thing, today according to information we have, the Parliament of Ukraine voted to extend the state of war and mobilization until August 2 for another 90 days, which means that the clashes on the territory of Ukraine will continue. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Western Africa. According to